The cemetery stretched out like a quiet sea of marble and stone, each gravestone telling a story of loss, pain, or memory. Alexander Voss, billionaire and titan of industry, walked slowly along the narrow path, his polished shoes barely making a sound on the damp gravel. The wind tugged lightly at his tailored coat, carrying a faint scent of rain and wilted flowers. Today marked 1 year since he had lost his son, and the memory still clung to him like a shadow he could never shake. As he approached the meticulously maintained plot of his son's grave, he felt the familiar pang in his chest, a hollow ache that no amount of wealth or success could fill. He knelt before the gravestone, tracing the engraved letters with a finger that had once held his son's tiny hand. "I hope you're at peace," he whispered, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. Then, from somewhere nearby, a muffled sob pierced the silence. At first, Alexander thought it was the wind rustling the trees, but the sound grew more distinct, more human. Turning his gaze, he saw her, a little girl, no older than 8, curled on the damp grass. Her knees were drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around a ragged teddy bear, her face streaked with tears. The sight struck a chord deep within him, stirring something he thought he had buried with his grief, empathy, and a sudden, inexplicable protectiveness. "Hey," he said softly, his voice cautious, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" The girl's wide eyes met his for a brief moment, a flicker of fear and desperation shimmering in them. I lost him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My dad, he's gone." She pressed her face into the teddy bear as if it could absorb her sorrow. Alexander froze. Her words echoed his own unspoken truth, the agony of losing a child he had lived with, then buried a year ago. For a long moment, he simply watched her, the wind tugging at his coat, the gray clouds overhead reflecting the weight of the moment. Finally, he knelt down at a careful distance, his presence large but non-threatening. "Sometimes the world feels too heavy," he murmured, "and it's hard to know what to do." The girl nodded silently, unsure if she could trust this stranger. Yet, in his eyes, she saw something familiar, pain mirrored by experience, compassion backed by presence. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, shaky breath. In the quiet cemetery, amidst the gravestones and whispering wind, the billionaire and the grieving child shared a fragile, wordless understanding. 2 lives marked by loss had intersected unexpectedly, and in that intersection, a seed of connection, of hope, had just been planted. Alexander couldn't shake the image of the little girl crying at his son's grave. Over the next few days, her small face haunted him in every quiet moment, over meetings, dinners, and the hollow luxury of his penthouse. He learned her name was Lily, and already, pieces of her shattered life began to emerge. Her mother had died from a prolonged illness, leaving her with a father who loved her but struggled with grief and responsibility. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, her father had died in an accident, leaving her utterly alone. Determined to ensure she was safe, Alexander visited her modest apartment one late afternoon. The building was old, its walls cracked and worn, the hallway echoing with distant footsteps. Lily's small figure peeked from behind the door, clutching her teddy bear like a shield. Her eyes were wary, scanning him for danger or deception. "Hi, Lily," Alexander said softly, keeping his tone calm and gentle. "I wanted to see how you're doing." She hesitated, a lump forming in her throat. "Why do you care?" she asked, suspicion and pain lacing every word. He paused, unsure how to explain himself. Billionaires rarely concerned themselves with children outside charity events. I don't want you to be alone," he finally said, the weight of truth in his voice. Lily's small frame trembled. She looked around her sparse apartment. Empty walls, a single bed, a small table, and let out a quiet sob. "I have nobody," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Her voice cracked, breaking into little gasps. "Nobody to help me, nobody to talk to." Alexander knelt at the edge of the doorway, maintaining a careful distance. He didn't want to overwhelm her. "You're not alone now," he said quietly. "I'll make sure someone is here for you." For hours, she began to tell him her story in fragments. The hospital visits for her mother, the lonely nights after her father's accident, the relatives who barely noticed she existed. With each sentence, Alexander felt a profound sorrow that mirrored his own grief for his lost son. Her pain was raw, unfiltered, and it ignited something in him, a desire to protect, to heal, and perhaps to find redemption in helping this little girl navigate a world that had treated her so cruelly. By the time he left, the bond between them had subtly shifted. Lily's shoulders were a little less tense, Alexander's heart was a little fuller. He had made a silent vow, he would not let her face life alone. She deserved safety, love, and hope, and he would do everything in his power to give it to her. Alexander couldn't ignore the nagging thought of Lily being alone any longer. The child needed stability, care, and someone who could guide her through the sudden void in her life. After consulting a trusted family friend and legal advisors, he arranged for her to stay temporarily under proper supervision while he worked on securing guardianship. Though practical, the move was emotional for both of them, especially Lily, who had grown used to the unpredictability of loss and abandonment. When he arrived at her temporary residence, Lily looked up from the small couch where she had been quietly drawing. Her eyes were cautious, brimming with suspicion, but also curiosity. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked, clutching her teddy bear as though it were a lifeline. Alexander shook his head firmly. "No, not this time. I'm not going anywhere." His voice carried an assurance he hoped she could trust. Over the following weeks, he visited daily. Sometimes he brought books and toys, sometimes he simply sat with her, sharing quiet moments that didn't require words. At first, Lily remained guarded, her small gestures of attachment tentative, a hand brushing his, a glance lingering a bit longer. But gradually, cracks formed in her protective walls. One afternoon, while organizing her little space, she pointed to a stack of notebooks. "I like drawing," she admitted softly. Alexander smiled. "Show me," he encouraged. Her tiny hands shook as she handed him a page filled with colorful sketches of fantastical worlds and smiling faces. "These are amazing," he said. "You have a talent for making the world brighter." For a moment, Lily's smile broke through her sadness, pure and unrestrained. Yet, challenges remained. Some of Alexander's business associates whispered criticisms, questioning the decision to take in a child, out of impulse. They didn't understand the depth of connection that had formed, the silent understanding that both he and Lily had found in each other. Alexander didn't care. In her, he saw resilience, hope, and the kind of unconditional trust he hadn't experienced since losing his son. As the days passed, Lily began to speak more freely about her fears, hopes, and dreams. She told him she wanted to go back to school, to have friends, and to feel safe again. Alexander listened, often in silence, realizing that while she was healing, so was he. Through her laughter, her small victories, and even her tears, he found a way to process his own grief and rediscover the capacity for love and connection. By the end of the month, it wasn't just a temporary arrangement, it had become the beginning of a new life for both of them. A life where two broken souls were learning to trust again, learning to find joy in the smallest moments, and beginning to understand that family wasn't just defined by blood, it could be chosen, nurtured, and protected. Months had passed since that fateful day at the cemetery. Lily had settled into a routine filled with school, friends, and the comforting rhythm of a safe home. The once lonely mansion now echoed with her laughter, tiny footsteps running across marble floors, and the soft hum of music she insisted on playing while drawing. Alexander watched her, often from the doorway, a small smile tugging at his lips. He had thought grief would define his life forever, but Lily had taught him something unexpected. Even after devastating loss, life could still hold warmth, joy, and hope. One crisp afternoon, Alexander and Lily returned to the cemetery. The wind rustled gently through the trees, carrying the faint scent of flowers and earth. Lily held his hand tightly, her small fingers entwined with his, a silent testament to the bond that had formed between them. Alexander knelt before his son's grave, placing a bouquet of fresh lilies on the polished marble. His eyes lingered on the engraved name, and a deep ache filled his chest, a reminder of all he had lost. But this time, the ache was tempered by something softer, a feeling of connection rather than isolation. Lily knelt beside him, her gaze curious yet reverent. "Do you think he'd like me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander smiled, tears threatening to spill. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "He would love you," he said softly. "Just like I do." For a long moment, they remained there, side by side, two lives intertwined by grief and healing. Alexander realized that in helping Lily navigate her loss, he had also confronted his own. The mansion, the wealth, the business deals, they had always been shields against loneliness and sorrow. But it was Lily, a little girl with a broken past and a resilient heart, who had shown him the true meaning of family. As they stood to leave, Lily tugged gently on his hand. "Can we come back tomorrow?" she asked, her eyes bright with hope. Alexander chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. "Yes, we can," he replied. Walking back through the cemetery gates, the two of them shared a quiet understanding. Life had taken from them, but it had also given a second chance, an opportunity to love, to protect, and to heal. And together, they would face whatever came next, two hearts mending in the shadow of loss, yet finding light in each other. For the first time in years, Alexander felt a profound sense of peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of connection, and the knowledge that love, no matter how small or unexpected, could rebuild even the most broken lives.